Tonight, as Israel vows to continue its fight against Hamas terrorists,
they have been led to believe that Israel is actually causing a genocide on the Palestinian people.
A new book aims to educate Americans about the roots of anti-Semitism and how to stay safe in the excessive heat plaguing much of America. Plus,
you're talking of decimations of communities, you're talking of closed schools, you're talking of closed hospitals.
The danger of the globe's shrinking population. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. As the war nears the 9-month mark, more Israelis may be called up to join the military. Good evening from the CBN News headquarters in Virginia Beach. I'm John Jessup. Well, a long-standing policy sparing ultra-Orthodox Jewish men the possibility of being drafted is over as of today after Israel's Supreme Court says those exemptions no longer apply. By law, most Israelis serve in the military. The court's ruling says there is no legal framework separating yeshiva students from others facing conscription, and said any religious school that tries to dodge draft notices will lose government funding. The decision is broadly seen as a blow to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with his government at risk of collapsing.
Netanyahu now faces a difficult decision. He can try to work with his partners to pass a new law that would somehow extend these exemptions. That would risk setting off mass protest and widespread anger toward the government. But if he implements the decision, he risks losing the support of his ultra-Orthodox partners. That would likely bring down the government and trigger new elections at a time when Netanyahu's popularity is at a low.
Today's decision comes as Israel's Defense Secretary Yoav Gallant continues his trip to Washington, D.C., meeting today with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Well, meanwhile, President Biden says he's appalled by violence outside a Los Angeles area synagogue. Pro-Palestinian supporters protested and blocked access to the Adass Torah synagogue Sunday. Fights broke out between rival sides and one person was arrested. On social media, the president said, quote, "Intimidating Jewish congregants is dangerous, unconscionable, anti-Semitic," and he added, un-American. Well, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, that's the title of a book a New York Times best-selling authors Noah Tishby and Emmanuel Acho. They say they wrote it to connect the dots between Jewish hatred and stereotypes and to show how they're fueling anti-Semitism today. CBN's Wendy Griffith has more.
The Jewish race, is that a thing? Are Jewish people white? But Jewish people control Hollywood, right? Am I even allowed to say Jew?
Hi everyone, I'm Noah Tishby and I am a Jew.
And I'm Emmanuel Acho and I have Uncomfortable Conversations.
In their new book, the co-authors of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew talk about seeing a problem and taking steps to address it.
Emmanuel noticed over a year before October 7th, the rise of anti-Semitism. And it was very interesting to me that somebody from outside of the Jewish community was able to detect that something is brewing. So he called me and he asked me if I would like to write this book. And I literally couldn't have said yes faster.
We're called to love people, but how can you love what you don't know? I finally got to learn about my present day Jewish brothers and sisters, what breaks their heart, what makes them smile, what makes them cry. And so I can try to be a genuine ally to those that are hurting.
Noah, you are Jewish. What are some of those stereotypes that are painful, that are heartbreaking, that you wish weren't there? And how do we address them?
Well, beautiful question. So first of all, the thing to understand is that anti-Semitism, which is anti-Jewish hate, is the oldest form of hate and discrimination that is still being practiced today. We see first accounts of anti-Semitism in 300 BC in Alexandria in Egypt. So the Jews have always been the brunt of kind of like bore the brunt of hate around the world. Anti-Semitism can look something like the Jews are the vermin of the earth and they're disgusting, like the Nazis used to say. But they also sound like, well, the Jews control the media and the Jews control the banks, which is also an anti-Semitic trope that people don't understand.
Tishby and Acho's book hit shelves just as pro-Palestinian protests spread across America's college campuses, bringing with them unprecedented levels of anti-Semitic statements and acts of violence.
And the thing to understand is this: they have been led to believe and been brainwashed to believe that Israel is actually causing a genocide on the Palestinian people, that Israel is a white colonialist state that shouldn't exist. That this has been going on for decades, so much so that now they think that anything that Israel does, and by extension, anything the Jews do, is wrong and needs to be dismantled. I am not discrediting Palestinian pain in any way, shape, or form. And being critical of Israeli government's policies is completely legitimate. This is not what we're seeing on campuses today. We're seeing gas the Jews. We're seeing such hate that is the result of decades of intentional poisoning, and we need to be very careful where this can lead.
Tishby, an Israeli activist and actress, recently tried to reason with anti-Israel protesters at the Sundance Film Festival, finding that most did not have their facts straight.
From the river to the sea, Palestine needs to be free from the occupation, which is illegal.
What's the river?
I forgot the river's name, but the sea is the Red Sea.
The Palestinian genocide, it's just awful.
What about the hostages? Do you know about the hostages?
Unfortunately, I'm not that educated about that part.
She fears what we've seen on college campuses comes dangerously close to jihadism.
So if you support jihadism, if you support that political arm of Islam as it manifests in Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas and ISIS and all the rest, then you're not on the side of history that supports democracy and liberties and everything we hold dear.
Acho, a former NFL linebacker and Fox Sports analyst, hopes their book will be an antidote that can possibly turn hatred to hope and even love.
First and foremost, I would hope for knowledge. I loved pursuing this book as a Christian man and the son of a pastor because of my affinity and intrigue by and for the Jewish community, right? When you read the Bible, you read about the Jews, you read about Jesus born in a manger, you read about Nazareth, you read about Bethlehem, but you kind of leave it in the Bible. And you don't remember that modern day there are Jews walking amongst you that are suffering.
And Noah, again, the stereotypes, what bugs you? What stereotype do you just think is ridiculous, or what stereotype is true?
I think the Jewish mama might be a real one, because I am one. And and all the cliches, I'm like, yeah, I'm very much like that. I really think my son can do no wrong. That's not true. He definitely can. So that, that one might be a bit real. But I loved the chapter about the Jewish stereotypes. We just let it all out, asking everything about money, about power, about being cheap, about all these things that to me are extraordinary, again, because when you come from a place of love and authenticity and faith and connectivity, nobody gets triggered, nobody gets upset, nobody gets hurt. You listen and you exchange ideas, and it was just a beautiful thing.
Despite the growing anti-Semitism, Tishby says she chooses to live wisely and not fearfully, adding that being Jewish is more than her faith. It's a very special way of life.
Even the basic thing of a Shabbat dinner, right? Every Friday night, whether you're secular or religious or traditional, whatever, most Jews will mark the night. So you sit around with your family and you don't have mundane conversations, and you do kind of this ritual that you've done for thousands of years, and it gives an anchor to the family that is pretty positive. Yeah. So there's some things about the Jewish way of life. This obsession with education is something that worked out throughout the years, right? So everything that we do is all out there. There's nothing secretive about being Jewish.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
So much to glean there. Thank you, Wendy. Well, Ukraine and Moldova are kicking off their formal bids to join the European Union. Membership negotiations began today in Luxembourg. It comes a decade after Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula, in part to cut off Ukraine from the west, and approaching nearly 2.5 years into the latest Russian invasion. The accession discussions mark a milestone for the Ukrainian people.
This is a truly historical moment for my country. All the nation stands as one behind this decision, and indeed, it's a very solid milestone of Ukraine's future membership in European Union, but also the future development of Ukraine.
The process for Ukraine to become an EU member could take years. Turkey has been in accession conversations since 2005. With little result. Well, here at home, the United States Surgeon General has declared gun violence an American public health crisis. And in a new 30-page advisory out today, Dr. Vivek Murthy lays out ways to combat it. His recommendations include universal background checks, new safe storage laws, red flag laws, and a ban on assault weapons. The Surgeon General told the New York Times, quote, "This issue has been polarized, it has been politicized, but I think we can understand that this is a public health issue. We have the opportunity to take it out of the realm of politics and put it into the realm of public health." Brutally hot temperatures show no sign of cooling off. How to stay safe in a heat wave when Faith Nation returns. Well, if you stepped outside anytime recently, you probably know good and well it's hot. And the National Weather Service says for many, it's going to stay that way for a while. Some areas in central, north, and northeast could see relief after today, but for tens of millions of Americans, the heat wave isn't letting up. With dozens of states seeing temperatures soaring into the 90s and 100 range through the work week. The warm weather is especially challenging for those who have to work outdoors.
It's very hard for me to feel okay. I'm just constantly wiping my forehead and trying to stay in the shade for the most part.
So it can get to 100 degrees back here. Everybody asks if we have AC. We do not. It's very hot and we get a long line, so it can get very rough sometimes.
And even in the age of air conditioning, the excessive high temperatures can be deadly. The Associated Press reports 2023 set a record for heat-related deaths in the United States. And joining me now for more on the heat is CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson. Lori, always great to see you. So first off, can you talk about some of the dangers posed by the heat and some of the health conditions that it can lead to?
Well, the first thing we think about are heat cramps, which can lead to heat exhaustion, which can lead to heat stroke, and that's the deadly one. So last year we saw 2,300 deaths from heat stroke in just America. And each year in recent years, that has gotten exponentially worse by the hundreds, more each summer. This is now the #1 cause of a weather-related death in the United States. #2, rip currents, and #3, tornadoes.
So I know a lot of people like my mother go out early in the morning to tend the garden. So if you're out later in the day, what are some of the first signs of distress?
Okay, so we talk about the heat cramps. So we're talking about pain or spasms in your leg and your abdomen. That can progress to heat exhaustion, which, as the name suggests, you feel tired, weak, dizzy. Your skin is pale, clammy, and cool, and that can progress to heat stroke. So then your skin is no longer clammy, it's dry, you're no longer sweating. Instead of pale, it's red, and it is also warm to the touch. Also, instead of that dizziness that we have with heat exhaustion, with heat stroke, a lot of times people are just flat out confused, or they have passed out. People who are suffering from heat stroke also have an internal temperature. If you take their temperature, it's 103, John, or greater. So obviously, these people need immediate medical care. Call 911 or put them in your car and drive them to the nearest ER.
So how do you avoid all of this? What tips do you have?
Really, there's no substitute for air conditioning. If it's super hot outside, really you do need to be in air conditioning. The good news is that most municipalities have what are called cooling centers. So if you don't know where your nearest cooling center is, call your health department or call 211. 211, and that will direct you, in most cases, to the nearest cooling center. You need air conditioning because, believe it or not, John, if the temperature indoors is above 95 degrees, fans can actually sometimes make it worse. Because you're blowing hot air on a person, and it makes it difficult for them to sweat, and that's the way we cool ourselves off, which is why we always say drink plenty of water, because that helps you to sweat. Is our natural cooling mechanism. So, regarding the air conditioning, when you want to check on people, rather than checking to make sure they're okay, if you have air conditioning, invite them to your house until the heat wave breaks.
And I was just going to ask you about that. The people who are most vulnerable or at risk, how should we be checking on them?
Right.
Other than
so
just
air conditioning, there's really no substitute. So they need to be in the air conditioning. The most vulnerable people are elderly. We always see every year these elderly people, God bless them, they stay in their homes and they don't ask for help, and then they end up perishing. So, and then also we think about babies, children, pregnant women, and also people who have chronic conditions like heart disease.
Lori Johnson, we always appreciate your medical advice. You gave us some great tips to help keep people safe and hopefully cool during the hot weather.
Indeed. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Well, populations aren't growing, and that has experts concerned. When we come back, what could happen if the world's demographics continue their downward spiral? Welcome back. The globe's richest countries have the world's lowest birth rates, and that's leading a new study to warn the world is heading toward what's called a so-called low fertility future. According to the report from the intergovernmental agency, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, birth rates in the world's 38 most industrialized countries have fallen about half since 1960. And with the world facing a population crisis, experts predict the number of people on the planet could begin to shrink in the next 30 years. So what will that mean for things like the economy and society as a whole? As CBN's Dale Hurd reports, the predictions are grim.
Empty playgrounds, schools without enough students to stay open, small towns deserted and abandoned. This is not some dystopian vision of the future. Demographers warn this is our future. Global population growth is leveling off, and by the second half of this century could begin to shrink for the first time since the bubonic plague struck the world almost 700 years ago.
Everything that we understand that functions in our societies today that depends on people, which is almost everything, is going to change.
Stephen J. Shaw is a data scientist, demographer, and producer of the film Birth Gap. He spoke to us from his home in Japan, one of the nations at the forefront of this global demographic collapse. Shaw told us he made the documentary mostly out of fear.
Fear of the future that we're, as a planet, completely unprepared for and mostly unaware of.
The population crisis could be the most important story of our time because of all the changes and potential problems that it will bring to our world. Taxes could soar as economies shrink. The many elderly could cause retirement and medical systems to collapse. Businesses will struggle to find employees, and there won't be enough young to care for the old.
That means sporadically you're going to have housing that's left desolated. You're going to have stores that are empty. You're going to have places with fewer and fewer employees, fewer customers. You're talking of decimations of communities. You're talking of closed schools. You're talking of closed hospitals.
A nation needs an average fertility rate of 2.1 children per woman to keep its population from shrinking. The countries on this map in some shade of blue all fall below that replacement rate. They include 70% of the global population in almost every developed nation. The U.S. fertility rate hit a new record low last year, dropping to 1.62 births per woman, a number temporarily offset by record numbers of illegal immigrants. In his film, Shaw explains how fewer children from fewer and fewer mothers creates a cascading effect, leading to a downward spiral from which Shaw says no known civilization has ever recovered.
This thing is going to be like a snowball rolling downhill. It's just going to keep building.
Daryl Bricker is global CEO of the polling firm Ipsos Public Affairs and co-author of Empty Planet, The Shock of Global Population Decline.
The top reason for people not having children is they just don't want them. That's the main reason people are not having children. The second reason tends to be related to their ability to have children, whether it's the relationship that they're in or the personal circumstances they find themselves in, or their physical ability to have children.
Shaw calls it unplanned childlessness, linked to delayed parenthood.
People trying or wanting to start families well into their 30s, when frankly biology isn't going to help necessarily. Biological challenges start around that time, but there's a bigger problem. Often people looking to start families in the 30s aren't in stable relationships. They've gone through a breakup. They don't have a partner. Their partner's not on the right page at the right time. It doesn't get easier to find that magical moment.
Government incentive programs to encourage larger families have seen only limited success. Shaw warns that nations with the lowest fertility rates could see their populations cut in half in as few as 2 generations. Most of our lives, we've been told how the world faces dangerous overpopulation.
If the present trends continue, our cities are going to be choked with people. They're going to be choked with traffic. They're going to be choked with crime. They're going to be choked with pollution. And they will be impossible places in which to live, and the explosions will be even worse.
So people stopped having enough children. And now this widening birth gap could be the most important social and political event in modern history.
The first message I would give to anybody is wake up. This is going to be one of the dominant issues, if not the dominant issue, through the course of the 21st century.
We've gotten used to this idea that things generally get better. But all of that relies on certain things being in place. It's not like population is going to glide down to some wonderful lower number. No, it's ugly. But also because there's no known solution. No society's ever come out of this.
The future doesn't have to look like this, but Shaw said we've got to start talking about it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Dale. Coming up, a mission to end hunger one meal at a time. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a New York City man is on a mission to feed the homeless, a calling that comes from a place of personal experience for him. A decade ago, Henry Thomas was looking for a way to give back after living through tough times in his own life where he himself didn't even have a home. He wanted to start a movement to help those in similar situations, and that's when he came up with the organization called Free Food for the Homeless. Thomas recruited his own son and a group of volunteers to hand out free food and water in and around New York City. In the decades since he started, the team has received donations from people on social media, and that's helped to fund the food and his mission.
Without that level of commitment, what I'm looking to build in the world could never come to reality. I have to give my life for this.
Thomas says he's looking for more volunteers to expand the movement around the country, and what a great movement that is. Thank you so much for watching Faith Nation. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.